Human behavior, fresh session. In today's session, we will be talking about personality. How does personality work? What is a personality? What comprises a personality? Why there are different people with different personality traits? What makes one person different from other person? What are the reasons why different people behave the way they behave in a group? What role the attitude plays on the overall behavior of a group? So this is all what we do. This is all what we study in this topic of personality. Personality, if we go from the perspective of book, then the definition of personality which is given is personality is defined as the characteristic sets of behaviors, cognitions, and emotional patterns that evolve from biological and environmental factors. So, personality, if you would like to summarize it in one word, is the way you respond to situations is your personality. There are different situations in your life. Sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're sad, sometimes you meet disasters, sometimes you get very excited, sometimes you face challenges, sometimes you face anxiety, sometimes you face some extraordinary situations. So all these different situations force you to uh, act differently in these different circumstances. There are certain personalities, there are certain persons who get carried away in the times when there are situations of um, trouble, when there is anxiety in which you are unable to take good decisions, appropriate decisions. So there are certain people who get carried away, but in the same situation, in the same anxiety situation, there are certain people who are going to build up their personalities. They are not going to get they're not going to get covered in the situations of challenge. They would rather call upon their courage. They would rather pull their courage along, and they are going to face the situation in which they are in at that time. So this way the whole situation gets to change, and the human personality and the human behavior overall becomes the core reason why a certain person is going to behave the way a person behaves. So as we have discussed, that the personality is defined as the characteristic sets of behaviors that in different circumstances we actually behave differently in a different manner. So it's the set of behaviors which actually comprises personality. Cognitions is, we studied that definition of cognition is actually it is intelligent or intellectual decision making. Cognition is the accumulation or making use of all your logical senses to understand a situation and then respond to a situation in a sensible manner. You do not react to situation, you rather respond to situation, because reactions are not calculated while the responses are calculated. So you do not become reactive personality, you rather become a responsive personality in which you take calculative moves to attend the challenging situation which you face in your life. So personality, if a balanced personality you have, then you are liked by everybody around, because everybody, every personality, whoever is actually composed, is somebody who pulls attraction, somebody who pulls attention. People like those personalities who are in control of themselves. You would see people, the heroics are always appreciated. There are certain people who during the tough times will not give up. They would fight, and they would fight hard. They have the mountain like determination to win. They have unshakable will to victory. They would not surrender. They would not get their knees bent down in front of trouble. They would continue, standing up in front of the tough times. So such personalities are always admired. Such personalities are always loved and liked by people who actually experience such heroics by any certain person. So as we discussed, that personality is the club sum of overall behaviors and cognitions and emotional patterns. So there are certain people who get carried away in circumstances of challenge, but there are certain people who remain very composed. So the emotional patterns are actually the way we respond in different situations, the way we react in certain situations. When we are reactive, then in those circumstances, we tend to be vulnerable, because there are certain people who would make use of certain words. They are going to talk in a certain manner, but if there are certain people who are vulnerable, they are touchy, then they are going to react to that person, to whatever whatever words are actually thrown upon that vulnerable person. So that person is going to respond, or rather react to that situation. So such persons are actually weak persons, because they are very easily controlled by the words which are thrown upon them by the other person. So uh, they become dependent, they become slave to the comments, or the words which are commented on them by the other persons. Rather, they are not very they're very weak people. In fact, rather, there are certain people who are very composed. They will not be weakened by whatever is actually thrown upon them. They would have their focus straight and laser like, built on a certain goal of their life, and they will not get deviated with whatever is coming their way. They are going to remain focused. So personality is the psychological state of your mind. Personality is your psychological response to situations. So if you are psychologically strong, you are not going to get weak in the situations when people are trying to turn you weak. But there are certain people who will get weakened, and such people and such personalities will always be targeted by people who are manipulators. So if you want to fight strong, and if you want to have your recognition in the world, then you would need to have this strong personality always working for you. Because if you do not have strong personality, then let me tell you something very candidly, that people will make use of you, people will play with you. So you need to be very psychologically strong to get successful in whichever part of life, whichever area of life, whichever field of life you choose to get excelled in. So based on these various manners, based on various responses which different people have towards the situations, there is an assessment which is made by people who are observing the personalities. There are different people who would respond and react in different manners in different circumstances. So there are certain people who are doing research. They will call names, they will say certain things to just to assess that how weak a person is. So personality assessment is, a person is actually posed to different situations, challenging situation, or time bound situations, or relaxed situations, or panic situations, and then there is going to be the response of that person checked by people who are exposing such persons to different circumstances, to exactly assess that how the reaction is going to come by that person who is being checked by different people. So assessment of personality is mainly dependent upon the way we respond to the situations we face in our life. So while exploring this as personality, there are like certain approaches. There are certain type of approaches, in fact, which are used by the psychologists to define different type of behaviors, different type of personalities. The first of these behaviors which which these psychologists define, the first of the type is psychodynamic. So when we talk about psychodynamic personality, so the psychodynamic is a approach in which uh, the human beings, the human functioning based upon the interaction of drives and forces within the person, particularly unconscious. So with this, we make an assessment that if a person is psychodynamic, then the person is rather going to be more driven by unconscious acts. You see, the psychodynamic approach see human functioning based upon the interaction of drives and forces within the person, particularly unconscious. So there are certain decisions which you take consciously, and there are certain decisions which you take unconsciously. So psychodynamic theory views our behaviors as caused entirely by unconscious factors over which we have no control. So there are certain factors over which we do not have any control. So psychodynamic personality is going to be mainly a weak personality, I would say, because a weak personality is easily get driven by the circumstances. So whatever circumstance a person with psychodynamic type of personality is actually exposed to, so that person is going to get weakened because the external factors are having control over the personality type of such person. In this psychodynamic approach, the human functioning is principally dependent upon the unconscious mind, unconscious personality. So there are certain things which we tend to get transferred to our unconscious mind unknowingly. So the personality mainly becomes the personality which is actually there pushed into the unconscious mind. So it is very important that we remain very cautious about this factor, that what do we send to our unconscious mind. So there are certain personality act behaviors which we do repeatedly. There are certain repeated and focused thoughts which we continue having focus on. That thing starts getting pushed to our unconscious mind. So that actually starts turning and converting into our true personality type, which is very very uh, dangerous, because if these things which are uh, being pushed to our unconscious mind unknowingly, then there's a highly likelihood that those things which are going to get pushed into that unconscious mind are mainly going to be the weak things, because uncontrolled things, if we get driven, gets pushed to the unconscious mind, then we tend to become a weak personality. So it's always difficult to be a strong personality. So likewise, an act which is repeatedly done and repeatedly done, gets pushed into your unconscious personality. Many times you would have noticed that when you learn to start driving your car, and then initially you have to drive consciously, you have to know that where the brake is, where the clutch is, where the accelerator is. In the automatic cars there is only accelerator and brake, so you don't have to worry about clutch because there is no clutch in automatic cars. So you would need to take care of everything because you are starting to learn how to drive. So when you are driving with and you're learning to drive new, so you will be a very conscious driver because you will be taking care of every different thing which you do, every different moves if you will be taking. But gradually, once you start driving and driving and driving, and the fear of drive starts gets vanished from your personality type overalls, then the type of personality which you get to have is the type of personality which you get to have is a personality in which you would notice that you will not need any conscious acts, you will not need uh, any conscious decision to drive the car, because unconsciously you will be driving the car. Unconsciously you will be that driving thing is going to get pushed into your unconscious mind. You will not be needing to take decisions from your conscious mind. It will be your unconscious mind which will be making you drive the car. So this way, the I mean that doing driving thing becomes part of your personality. You do not have to do any special act to do that thing. Same goes for, the thing which you do repeatedly. The simplest most the simple most important thing is that whatever type of personality you want to turn into, you need to start doing those acts repeatedly, because whatever you start doing repeatedly eventually is going to become your new you. So you, if you want to become a strong, then you need to have strong acts. You need to behave strongly under the circumstances of challenge, because if you will continue behaving in a weak manner, then that would remain as your personality type during the days of during the times of challenging situations. So that's something which is very important, that whatever way we are going to behave in the situations of trouble, in the situations of challenge, that is going to define our personality. Whatever repeated act which will we do, in the challenging times is eventually become going to become our personality. So the psychodynamic personality is a type of personality which takes action from the unconscious mind. Psychodynamic theory views our behavior as caused entirely by unconscious factors over which we have no control. So, like we just discussed, that whatever gets pushed to our unconscious mind becomes our personality. For example, I mean, if there is some we if we get to hear sudden scream and we normally shout, we scream in response to a scream. That's our personality, because we get so fearful, we get so traumatic that we get so worried that there is some disaster going to take place. So we start getting and we start responding in very uncontrolled manner. We will be behaving in an unnerved manner. We will be behaving very nervously if there is a sudden scream. And because we are a weak personality at that time, if we are weak personality and if we are not very used to the screams to be heard on repeated basis, daily basis, then there is the immediate response to the scream is going to be very panic response, is going to be very panic way. In very panic manner we will be responding to the situation in the initial go. But as soon as we start listening to that scream on repeated basis, that thing starts turning into our personality type, and we will become so used to with it that we do not get worried about it at all after that. So this psychodynamic is a type of personality which is totally dependent upon the way the unconscious mind is going to take command of the situations which in which we will be in. So unconscious mind, therefore it is very important that we study about unconscious mind, that what is unconscious mind, how does it work, and how exactly the type of actions can be pushed into the unconscious mind. So whatever way you would like to get your personality defined, you need to study the unconscious mind, because that psychodynamic is a type of personality. If this is, for example, the true personality type, if this approach is the only approach if you talk about, then your unconscious mind is going to be the absolute driver of your personality. So absolute driver of your personality. So you need to have control over your unconscious mind. If you do not have, because on one part we say that unconscious mind, I mean, is that part of mind in where we have do not have any control. But if you study the mind sciences, you will get to know that even you can control, you can revamp, you can revamp your responses through the NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming. So, with the use of NLP, you can totally revamp your personality. You can revamp your responses towards the situations of nervousness, towards the situation of panic and extreme chaotism. So that way, you are going to be redefined, and a new you is going to be there if you have studied this unconscious mind and how exactly this unconscious mind works. So the second approach, which the psychologists study about human behavior is behavioristic. When we talk about behavioristic personalities, so behaviorism is a theory that human or animal psychology can be objectively studied through observable actions rather than thoughts and feelings that cannot be observed. So, no matter how a person thinks, no matter how a person believe upon certain things, the main thing which is going to make other person understand you, the main thing which is going to make you known to other people is the way you act. So, the way they say that actions speak like louder than words. So, if a person is behavioristic, so in this behavioristic approach, the principal thing which is to be done, which is going to be done, is that you will be observed through your behaviors. So, as we studied that behaviorism is a theory that human or animal psychology can be objectively studied through observable action. So, whatever way you respond, whatever you behave in a certain situations is actually your personality rather than thoughts and feelings, because your thoughts and feelings are totally hidden. Your thoughts and feelings cannot be get noticed, cannot be known to others, but your personality is evidently known to people. Your personality is evidently available for other persons to observe. So therefore, you need to mind your actions. You see, if you will not mind your actions, then people will pass judgments for you. People will see you, and people will not, put a focus on that how exactly would you be behaving in manner, how would you be thinking in during certain situations. But people would rather be more bothered about the way you act, in fact. So the actions would be in mainly defining your personality. So like we just said, that actions speak louder than words. So the way you would act will be main thing people will be having focus on. So the behavioristic approach tells us that no matter what a person talks about, no matter what how tall the person claims, no matter how tall the claims of a person is, but the way a person would behave and respond in situation, that is the true personality of a human being. So you would not put focus on the way a person is talking or the way a person is speaking. You would rather have your focus on the way a person is actually behaving. So that is the type of personality, that is the true personality of that particular person. So behavioristic personality is always going to behavioristic approach is always going to observe a personality not by the thoughts, not by any other psychological factor, but rather by the observable actions, because that is something which is observant, that is something which is apparent for everybody to notice. You see, so that is behavioristic personality. Psychodynamic personality was a type of personality which is more getting driven by the unconscious mind. Behavioristic approach, psychodynamic approach. Psychodynamic approach says that a person is driven by the unconscious mind mainly. Behavioristic approach says that do not judge any person by anything else but by the actions which the person is holding. The repeated action which the person in fact do or take is actually the personality, is actually the true personality of that person. Behavioristic approach once gets over, then the next another important approach is humanistic approach. So humanistic approach is another type of approach in the psychology which would observe the humans in another manner. And the humanistic approach, the psychologists which belong to the humanistic part of the world of psychology, they would say that humanistic psychologists try to see people life as those people would see them. You see, behaviorism. You see, you would recall behaviorism in your mind, because in behaviorism, what we studied, that your behaviors are the reasons why people are going to know you the way they would know you. So humanistic psychologists try to see people's lives as those people would see them. They tend to have an optimistic perspective on human nature. So in humanistic approach, there is, uh, this approach tells us that they tend to have an optimistic perspective on human nature. Humanistic people are actually optimistic people. They would not focus on the negative things, they would rather more focus on the positive things. If you are a positive person, if you can see positives even during the times of disaster, then you are a humanistic person. Humanistic, uh, they tend to have an optimistic personality perspective on human nature. They focus on the ability of human being to think consciously and rationally, to control their biological urges, and to achieve their full potential. So here we just got to know that human personality, human behavior can be positive all the times. Can remain optimistic all the time. So humanistic psychologists try to see people's life as those people would see them. They tend to have optimistic perspective of human nature. They focus on the ability of human beings to think consciously and rationally, to control their biological urges, and to achieve their full potential. That is very important, because you would notice that we tend to so much um, get driven by the innermost desires. You see, those desires are many times not driving us for the positive things. Many times those desires are only making us get driven towards wrongful acts, wrongful deeds. But the humanistic person, when we say human, the first thing which comes to in our mind is sanity. When you talk about human and animal, animal is animal is a creature which would not distinguish between a good act and a bad act. That is an animal. But a human, when the word human comes into our mind, what we tend to think is that human is going to be better than animal, because animal would not know that what he's doing, but human would know that what he's doing, you see. So he or she is doing, you see. Animal cannot decide cannot decide that what is wrong and what is right, but the human can decide, you see. But unfortunately, in today's time, what we see is that many times there are dogs, who are more humanistic than animals, that I mean, than the humans. It's very, very surprising, because the humans would behave, like dogs, and the dogs would behave like humans. I mean, we would see dogs being more caring, dogs being more sincere and honest, and humans would be more, unsincere. They would be, they cannot be trusted, but people can trust in dogs. So it is very, very strange, because so the human behaviors have gotten so much driven to the materialistic desires, the materialistic things. Because of that, we would not pay heed to things which are important. But as an animal, when a dog, I mean, which is always used as an example of loyalty, you see, which is very unfortunate. I would say unfortunate in the sense that it's an animal at the end of the day. You see, when we have to give the example of loyalty or loyalism, then we would pull the name of a dog. The first thing which in today's time comes into our mind is dog. You see, but uh, I mean, technically, this trait should be more attached to human being, because humans are sane creatures. They take sane decisions. They have sanity given to them by the Almighty, so they can actually decide between good and bad, right and wrong. So that's why sanity remains uh, attributed for the humans rather than for the animals. So humanistic personality, whenever you get to have this word in coming your mind, crossing your mind, so the first thing which should come into your mind is optimism. Human, always positive, always get driven towards the better life, always get driven towards the better type of personality. So that's something which is affiliated and attributed to the positive side of a personality. So this is something which is very, very important, that when we study the this human sciences, and we study about human behavior, then different type of personalities would make us either get confused, or the different type of personalities would make us think that how in the world certain things are taking place. We would like to be rather called as intelligent person, but the way we would behave, we will rather prove ourselves as weak. So this is very strange. So therefore, sanity is something which is uh, always human should be giving importance to. If we will not give importance to sanity, then we will always be driven. Uh, we will always remain attached to the psychodynamic type of personality. In psychodynamic life, it's studied that psychodynamic is a type of personality which has no logical control over the type of behavior which that person is going to be responding to the world with. Therefore, humanistic is a type of personality. Humanistic is a type of approach in which you would always remain positive. This is the humanistic personality. So another type of personality, which when we talk about another type of personality, which we talk when we talk about personality types, or another type of theory rather, which we talk about when we talk about personality, is trait theory. So trait theorists are primarily interested in the measurements of traits, which can be defined as habitual patterns of thoughts, behaviors, emotions. So the trade theory says that I mean, your habitual patterns are actually the true you. I mean, what you do habitually is your actual personality. No matter how you would perceive yourself in your mind, no matter how good you think you are in your mind, but your habitual patterns will define you. Your habitual thoughts will define you. Your habitual emotions will define you. If you say that you're a strong person, but every time an emotional situation comes and you start weeping, you start crying, then you are not a strong person, because crying is not the sign of being strong. Crying is sign of being weak. So if you think that you are emotionally strong, then these panic situations, these emotional situations should not make you weak. So the trait theory mainly talks about this, that that human behavior is mainly your repeated act, human patterns, habitual patterns of behavior, habitual patterns of thoughts, and habitual patterns of emotions is actually your true personality. So these are the four type of personality approaches which the psychologists actually talk about when they talk about personality. So we have a lot of strong personalities in the world which are given importance to, which are given heed to. I mean, people talk a lot about Nelson Mandela, who, despite having spent a lot of time in jail, having spent 27 years in jail, normally a person would uh, get to total disaster state of mind. But despite having spent all that during a very long time in the jail, he still remained a good leader. We have this definition of Nelson Mandela, that there are two definitions of fear. Fear is like face everything and rise is the positive definition, which is a fear. That uh, this is not the definition of correction. Nelson Mandela talked about courage. In fact, Nelson Mandela said that courage is not the absence of fear. He said that courage is not the absence of fear, rather, courage is doing something which you have to do despite having fears inside. So, this is a courage. This is courage defined by Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela said that if you're courageous enough, then no matter how much fearful you are inside your mind, how much fearful you are inside your heart, but you will do the act which is important unconditionally. You are going to do that. So that's to what we call courage. Because when you are strongly gets driven by the courage trait of your personality, then you are actually called courageous. So the two definitions of fear, I mean, when you talk about personality, which are actually discussed about, are one, positive definition of fear, and second is negative definition of fear. So the positive definition of fear is FEAR. When we talk about FEAR, F is like face everything and rise. Fear is FEAR. The negative definition we'll talk about in a bit, but the positive definition of fear is that face everything and rise. Because the fear would want you to run away, fear would want you to surrender, fear would want you to bow your head, fear would want you to just get on your knees. But this is the negative side of being in fear. So there is another positive side of being in fear. So it's only the way you look at fear. If you take a look at this fear negatively, then yes, this fear is going to kill you. But there is another angle by which or through which you can actually look at fear, which is a positive angle. So from the positive angle, from the positive side, fear is actually defined as or fear is a type of situation, or fear is the definition of fear, which tells you that face everything and rise. This is what fear is when you talk about fear in positive context. But when you talk about fear in negative context, then fear says forget everything and run away. FEAR. The positive definition was face everything and rise, while the negative definition is forget everything and run away. This is the type of situation which we get into when we are in the state of fear. Fear forces us to run away. FEAR, forget everything and run away. This is something which negative state of fear tells us, teaches us that no matter how what type of situation is, no matter whether if you can get back or you can bounce back or you can get hold of that situation again, you need not think about it at all. You just need to forget everything and run away. That's when you're being negative. But when you're being positive, so you when that time you are being positive. So you would not be worried about all these things. You will be rather more positive, and you would be thinking about positive things. You would take a look at this fear, in such circumstances as an opportunity to prove your mettle. You will take fear as training by Almighty. You would train because in the during the testing times, during the tough times, the characters are tested, the strengths are tested, the muscles are tested, the strong personalities are tested. So the tough times are for the weak, are very terrible times, but for the strong people, they would enjoy tough times. Like they say that eagles do not fear storms. So when the storms come, they would fly above the clouds which are there down, and doing all the thunderstorm down there. So all other, or other when we all other birds, they're going to go to their nests and they would hide themselves. But the approach of eagle is always going to be different. The eagle will not search for, its nest, his or her nest. An eagle would fly above the clouds. That's the approach of an eagle, and that's the approach of a strong person. That should be the approach of a strong personality. That tough times are there to make you more strong. Tough times are not there to make you more weak. So these are the tough times when your true personality is actually tested. So you need to be strong during your tough times, even if you are very weak, even if you have a weak personality type. But when these tough times come, if you continue to behave in a strong manner, if you start behaving artificially as if you're a strong person, that eventually that thing is going to become your personality. For example, you're having fear of getting uh, you know you're having fear that you might get killed in a certain situation, and because of that you are not taking yourself to pose that situation. But despite all that fear, if you make use of courage, which is your weapon, if you just pull that weapon inside your heart, and then by making use of courage you start facing that situation, that first time you will be fearful, second time you will have that little confidence that you have already dealt with it for once. So that way, once you will start meeting with this situation repeatedly, then you are gradually making it as part of making it part of your personality. A time will come, a time will come, just like driving. When we talked about driving, that in the beginning you drive the car consciously, then a time comes when you start driving your car unconsciously. So it's a journey from being conscious to unconscious. So once you start doing a thing repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly, so you, from the conscious you become an unconscious you. So it's upon you that what you push your into your unconscious mind, what you push into your unconscious personality. So despite having fears, despite having uh, you know this uncertainty that you might get collapsed if you just get yourself pushed to face that situation which is making you go uh, trauma, which is giving you trauma. So you should, instead of just running away, you should rather face that situation. And once you start repeatedly facing and facing and facing that situation, so eventually that fear will starts getting will starts fading away. You will notice that your personality type is changing. Initially the butterflies were creating disaster for you, but gradually those butterflies start getting vanished and your personality starts changing. So that's the way we work on personalities, and that's the way we change our personalities. So if you want to become a good strong personality, if you want to be a strong behavioristic person, then you would need to be very courageous and you need to act in a strong manner, no matter how tough or how terrible the situation is. This is exactly how you can actually convert and totally transform your personality. So in today's topic, we talked about personality, we talked about weak personalities, we talked about strong personalities. We started evaluated that how weak personality is going to respond to situation, and how a strong and courageous person is going to respond to situations. We talked about the definition of personality. Then we talked about psychodynamic personality, which is driven by psychodynamic theory, which is mainly having focus on unconscious behavioral patterns. Then we talked about behavioristic patterns, in which people would be more rather judged by the actions they do. Humanistic is an approach in which we would know that a human being is always going to be very positive and optimistic. A human being is always going to take an optimistic approach towards life, and trade theory tells us that it's, I mean, the thing which we repeatedly do is actually we truly are. So this way we actually get ourselves known to the world by the way we behave repeatedly. So with this, I hope we have now understood the core concepts of this topic, this chapter. And even if you have not understood this topic in the first go, you can always play the same video again. And with this, because we have discussed the very simple and basic examples, so that is going to help you a lot in understanding this topic. And with this, we conclude this topic of today, and we will be meeting in the next topic, which is going to be the last topic of our this course. And we have almost reached to the end of this course. And I hope you have enjoyed studying this new way. And these videos are being very fruitful for you, because now in classes, what you do is that you get to listen to the lecture only for once, but here you can you can listen to the same lecture for like many times, as many times as you want to. So let's conclude, and we will meet in the next session. Thank you.